Can you say something about the situation on gender identity in your country? Is there self-ID, etc.?
Here in Argentina, gender identity law passed in 2012. Its central point is that gender identity depends on self-declaration. So interested parties can request registration or self-declaration without any prerequisites. There is no any requirement, neither psychological nor medical. Furthermore, if the person requires some kind of intervention, hormonal or surgical, it will be carried out with informed consent and at no cost. Finally, to get comprehensive hormonal treatments, it won't be necessary to prove their consent to total or partial genital reassignment. The biggest problem of this law is the exposure of minors who can receive hormonal treatment or have surgeries based on their own discourses. Even if those who are responsible for those minors do not agree, because justice would intervene, forcing parents to comply with the law. The approval of this law lacked extensive social discussion and was the result of the lobbying power of supporters of queerism. Today, in Argentina, it's an ideological apparatus of Kirchnerism. The law was voted, and then an intense censorship campaign was carried out so that anyone who tries to discuss something will be accused of hate crime. Every feminist who is critical about gender is an ideology, about gender as an ideology is accused of turf and banned from discussions and debates. Even I've been threatened and told more than once that I would be beaten. In this way, Argentinian feminists have seen tens of years of struggles going back in different fields. One of them being sports, for example. Another one is politics. It has become increasingly common in the trade union sphere, political parties, and even the state that the women's representation is in secretariats and public offices are trans persons. So it's a real problem here. Besides, setback for women is very important in the media, where trans characters hold themselves up as an example of moral and suffering, relegating women's interests and struggles. However, the overrepresentation of trans people and even men in the women's movement is still more serious. In Argentina, the 8M March is considered a national event, just like the National Women's Meeting. Both gathers hundreds of thousands of participants. In both, disproportionate representations and presence of the trans population are now imposed to the detriment of women. There is enormous pressure on the National Women's Meeting to incorporate what the diversities demand. Moreover, now they want to change the name and add trans, transvestites, non-binaries, gays, fags, etc. to women. Since the demands of the feminist movement recede, the issue of abortion comes last in these spaces because it's considered as a matter of a privileged ones. A worrying trend created by the law is the disappearance of women toilets, for example. I think it happens all over the world where this law is working. It's considered discriminatory that there are baths according to sex here. The demand for sexy toilets in public spaces has gradually ceased. Women don't have the right to ask for safe spaces anymore. Thus, genderism does not share its organizations and institutions with anyone, but it aims to lead the women's movement. These colonizations needs erasure of women. They erase us when they say we have privileges and when they threaten us by accusing us of hate crimes. These actions are absolutely misogynistic and make it possible for men to do whatever they want. After all, no murder will be considered femicide if the criminal self-declares as a woman. The last political action, very serious and so unseen to most people, just like every step that queer ideology has been carrying out in Argentina, was the compulsory sexual assignment bill. It was proposed by an official deputy, and the law pretends the elimination of sex category in any documentation, whether public or private, since they consider that sexual assignment is compulsory and the sex category is false. In this way, women's movement is transforming itself into support of other interests, with a clear consequence, the strengthening of mass patriarchy that is a given derivative of feminism.
The situation on gender identity here in Spain is sadly changing quite fast. Like, okay, you probably all know that from 2007, the Socialist Party introduced the possibility of self-ID and change of sex in the personal ID and passport. But this is only an option that is open after you've gone through a mandatory psychological treatment and therapy for 2 full years prior to these changes on your legal document. So, of course, during these 13 years, even though this law has been in place and used obviously several times, the concept of gender identity as a fundamental right, or as if it was a tangible trait that people need to be entitled to, was not present in our country. Spanish provinces, smaller territories, were somehow quietly introducing the possibility of legally changing the sex in your ID by self-IDing. But the document in the last instance goes to the state. So this was acting as a more stringent and last filter and as a safe. However, now we're in a bit of a breaking point, because from 2017, the party Podemos, and it's now Unidas Podemos, has been trying to introduce the gender identity law similar to other countries, Canada, Malta, Norway, etc. Slowly but steadily, but very quietly, as they do, but they were never in the governments. However, since the coalition government's agreement in 2019, they've been taking the areas. They've been doing pacts of different branches of the government, and they've taken the areas regarding women's issues. Nothing has been spoken about women so far, just Minister of Equality, who has had a very urgent, very burning feeling of needing to introduce the concept of gender identity. Self-ID, they go as far as the felt perceived gender and all these queer theory wording. If they succeed, and the law is already in public consultation process, the sex-based rights of Spanish women will be absolutely jeopardized, as they are in places like Canada. The thing is, what I think, everybody thinks our country is special, but I think this is additionally critical for a country that has only started recording our own type of sex-based domestic violence, which is not domestic violence in the domestic environment, but is something that is produced by a male partner or in a male relationship, We've only started recording that since 2004. We have already 1,000 martyred women.
In Mexico, there's self-ID in 9 states, which makes up almost a third of them. Mexico City, Coahuila, Colima, Hidalgo, Michoacán, Nayarit, Oaxaca, San Luis Potosí, and Tlaxcala. To put this into perspective, keep in mind, abortion is legal with little reservations only in Mexico City and Oaxaca. In Mexico City, the capital, there's self-ID since 2015, which means if somebody wants their birth certificate to state they are not the sex they are, the steps are very easy and there is no need of proving anything at all. I call it the Por mis huevos Act. An approximate translation would be, I am a woman because I say so, and you can suck my dick. There are currently bills being pushed intending to make self-ID to the constitutional level and thus compulsory for all 32 states. In the following weeks, a bill will be voted in Mexico City's Congress to allow children, even children, this administrative express procedure instead of the judicial one currently in force. Advocates of this bill pretend they are defending the rights of the minors to have an identity and the free development of their personality. And also, and most importantly, they pretend to be protecting them from the need of having to take poverty blockers in order to be recognized as the gender they identify with. But this is not true. It's nothing but a distortion, surprise, surprise. What it requires is having a judge or expert certify the child is indeed transgender, which of course they can't. But what these self-ID advocates are trying to do is expediting the alteration of the birth certificate so that it states without delay, the boy who likes to wear dresses is in fact a girl, or the girl who doesn't want to be sexualized by adult males is a boy in the inside. They also claim this would put an end to school bullying of those kids. I honestly cannot imagine how could a child defend themselves from being bullied by producing a birth certificate in the middle of the playground. Again, to see how priorities stand, keep in mind that in Mexico, the trafficking of girls for prostitution is a huge problem that isn't being sufficiently tackled. 2 years ago, we had an exciting plot twist. In the state of Oaxaca, in election time, different political parties nominated males for municipal office, but these males were posing as females so as to occupy gender quotas. In Oaxaca, among the Zapotecas, there are these males called Nemushes, who have been traditionally considered the third sex because they play feminine roles and dress in frocks. Beautiful embroidered frocks and wear flower headdresses. As you can imagine, queers claim these indigenous people are in fact transgender. I think it could be argued this might be cultural appropriation by their own standards. But anyway, these male politicians, mind you, were not mushes at all. They were cheats trying to misappropriate women's candidacies for town councils. The thing is, self-ID allows them to. Why not? Remember the Por mis huevos Act? But guess who protested? Not the women, but the mushes, who were outraged, and the local election court listened to them, and those candidacies were eventually considered a fraud because these males were messing with such an important recognition as trans identity. Of course, when we gender abolitionists talk about the risks of self-ID, nobody listens to us as carefully as they listen to the mushes. I wonder if deep down, Oaxacan electoral authorities know they are males, actually.
Inge Kleine has already spoke in great length about the situation in Germany last week. So very briefly, on that. Conversion therapy is now prohibited also for trans youth. And we have proposals for a law for self-ID. For now, it's still, you can change your legal sex, but you need an expert opinion and all of that. But what I want to talk about in the beginning is that I don't think that we only need to focus on the laws. And I want to talk about what it means for lesbians already in Germany. And what I see is that it doesn't even matter if the law allows us anything. We are so socialized into making space for men. We're socialized into this feminine submission to male wants and needs. And then we have the queer theory coming up, turning submission into something good and fancy and morally and intellectually superior, that actually they are just great at making us do what they want and need already without any changes of the law. And I see that it's a big problem that we keep on talking about safe spaces, but it's not just safe spaces. It's about autonomous feminist spaces that we need to keep alive. And most of the people out there don't even understand why we need this. I have friends that I told, oh, I have been to feminist, like women-only gatherings, and they were like, oh, but isn't that discriminatory against men? We don't even need those laws if it's in the mind of people, men and women, that women getting together is already discriminatory. So what happens is that lesbians welcome men anyways. Men are welcome at the Dyke March. It doesn't matter what they wear. Men are welcome at lesbian parties. It doesn't matter what they wear. We have such a problem with setting these boundaries. And so what happens in Germany is that women are following this logic already without any laws in place. And lesbians need strength and pride and courage, something that we need to get as lesbians and as women through feminism anyways, to feel entitled enough to focus on us and to keep men out. So we need the ability, the emotional and psychological ability to defend our boundaries, to know that we have a right to it, and we need to be able to defend it. And already just by stating this necessity, it's so clear that we are dealing with a very, very reactionary movement that tells us that women who open their boundaries are the good women. And that is obviously reactionary, because feminism has already told us that we need to actually learn to have boundaries in the first place. And we're still on this part of building them for lesbians. And there they come along telling lesbians that they're transphobic for having boundaries and actually discriminatory against men in the first place if they have boundaries. So the breaking of women's and lesbians' boundaries, physical boundaries, psychological boundaries, emotional boundaries, is what gives men a fix. And that's what we're dealing with. And what is happening already in Germany from a lesbian perspective, it doesn't matter what you think about online dating, sex parties, and all of that, but the reality for lesbian in Germany is already, you're not among lesbians when you do online dating. You can go on a date and you end up sitting there with a man without knowing this beforehand. I know a woman who organized sex parties. Whatever you think about them, that's not the point. It's about the right to do those things. So she was organizing sex parties since the 80s. She can't go there anymore because there are always men at those parties. And she has been told that there was there was a paper, a sheet in the darkroom. Again, you may think about whatever you want, but on the paper it said, some lesbians have penises, get over it. At a lesbian party. So there we have rape culture in Germany, in lesbian spaces. At the Dyke March, women got attacked for having a sign that said, women change society, not your bodies, on the Dyke March. All the smaller and bigger lesbian German organizations have the asterisk. It's not international, but we do that in Germany. We have the little asterisk, and that means if you put lesbians an asterisk, it means everyone, including men. So that's now, it's like spreading like a fucking virus. And so big organizations, small organizations, they all have it. And it's cool to have it. And it's a problem if you don't have it. And you have lesbian sports organizations that are now inclusive of men. And we have two big nationwide gatherings. One is more like party gathering. That's very queer now, very inclusive. And then we have a different gathering, which is more political, autonomous since the 70s. And it's starting to be more inclusive. They tried to get the asterisk last year. They didn't really succeed. So that's the situation for lesbians in Germany already. There are no exclusive spaces, basically. And it doesn't matter what the law says, because we don't feel that we are entitled to those spaces. And women don't have the strength and the courage to say, this is a lesbian-only space, and men are not allowed.